In the gym and in the car, with our advice you could go far. We fuck things up and we make mistakes, and talk about our sexy dates. We host events and go to clubs, but most of all we're still in love. It's getting hard for this to rhyme, just as well 'cause it's bed hopping time.
Hello and welcome to episode 168 of the Bed Hoppers podcast. My name's Mr. H.
I'm Mrs. H.
Thank you very much for joining us. We're recording this midweek in the lead up to our Winter Wonderland event with the Wanderlust Swingers.
Yes.
We are pretty much, there's boxes everywhere.
I think we've got all of Amazon.
I think most of Amazon has been to our house at one point or other. There's a lot of packaging everywhere.
Yeah. You keep buying shit.
Well, I keep buying shit and we keep being sent shit.
Yes.
So
not shits in the post.
No, fortunately we haven't had one of those for at least a couple of weeks. But we've had a number of parcels and packages so that we can, one, host the wonderful event.
Yes.
And two, do the room crawl thing.
I hope there's nothing wintry in there that's going to defrost.
Well, I don't think so. We should be all right.
And plus you have a million outfits.
Well, this is true. I do. Well, I have at least one outfit.
You do.
For the whole event
and
thing.
I, more importantly, have my outfit.
This is true. Though by the time this podcast, whatever they call them, right? This podcast comes out, we'll have already done the Winter Wonderland and we'd have said goodbye to everyone probably, and we'd be on our way home.
And it's a sold out event.
It's sold out
completely and utterly sold out.
Well, this is amazing news. And it's weird because we're obviously talking about it as though it's about to happen, but for you, gentle listener, it will have happened. So
yes, and it will have been amazing.
It was the best event ever. we have no reason to think it won't be, so therefore we're going to assume that it was a marvellous event.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Have you got Aslan coming along as well?
Aslan the lion? No.
Yeah.
But I have hidden Mr. Tumnus in a cupboard.
Oh my God. He'd probably enjoy that.
He probably would.
He does seem to have closeted vibes.
Always watching. So thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about, we're going to wing this one a little bit. I know that might come as a shock, but we wanted to talk about something that we had a conversation about while we were away in Miami. And this is triggered by a sort of series of not unfortunate events, but a series of moments that led us to have a pretty big discussion.
There was a catalyst, for sure.
There's normally a cat involved.
Yeah, there was a catalyst, I think, that led us to have a really important conversation. One I didn't really see as about to have, but then we had it. And I was like, this is actually a really good conversation. And I'm really glad that we had it, if that makes sense. Not that we really got anywhere with it.
Well, I think the concept of it was important, but enough teasing about the whole thing. Let's set the context and set the scene. So we're at PCAP for a number of days. In fact, for all of the days that were available at PCAP and more.
We were there.
We were definitely there. There are pictures of us. We existed, right? And you've always been keen on having some sort of lady pile, but in particular that you're keen on having a real sort of lady interaction, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a pile.
No, that helps though, I suspect.
Although a pile is what we keep referring to because it's fun to think about. But I'm really not that greedy. I don't really want to have a pile.
You really don't want piles?
No.
Okay.
But just, yes, lady interaction.
So, and I think there was a couple of moments when that opportunity was going to come your way, and through a mysterious, unfortunate circumstances and series of events, Lemony Snicket was not involved in this situation, although you'd probably been quite happy if Neil Patrick Harris was involved somehow.
Oh, yeah, I like him.
And Jim Carrey, maybe, I don't know. He's a bit weird these days.
No, not in that way.
No. Okay, all right. But anyway, the point being, through a series of events, that didn't happen for you.
Did not.
And there were sort of a couple of situations where you could have perhaps done something had our communication skills been stronger, and probably we discussed more before going into this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For those other things to have happened, we absolutely would have needed to have had some conversation before, because we didn't know. I didn't know.
Well, I think, and part of this conversation was around actually, there was an opportunity where you could have gone and played with a lady by yourself.
Man, you're saying that now.
Well, I do say that now, and I think the tricky bit was, that was apparent in hindsight.
What a wonderful thing.
Well, it is a wonderful thing.
It's true, though. You sometimes don't realise until after something's happened but something could have gone differently if you handled it differently. But you don't know until afterwards, do you?
And you don't know what you got till it's gone. So I think we obviously we went to the event and we went through this, and nothing bad happened out of it. It was just oh shucks, we missed that opportunity, or you missed that opportunity. And I think you're a little bit disappointed as a result of it, right?
I was disappointed. However, I need to caveat that really carefully, because when I say disappointment, I don't mean I'm disappointed with what I have. Yep. I want to make that really clear. Mm-hmm. It's not that I'm lacking something in my current relationship, because it's not. But saying I could have had something, and if only we talked about it, we maybe could have explored that. Yes, I think that's a fair assessment. But I do want to make it clear I'm not unhappy with what we have right now.
But I think so. On the other context that I want to sort of bring on the show, and these are all kind of things that we've spoken about, but we haven't quite ironed out and flattened out in the right way. So if this comes across a bit rambly, then obviously you've listened to the podcast before. You can expect a little bit of that, but it may be even more Hugh Granty and gosh. Well, we're
finding our way with it. We've not really had this out properly. And one of the things we said, I think, when we opened our marriage is that we would be honest about things. And one of the things that we kind of tried to pledge to do, I think, when we started this podcast as well, was to be honest about things that happened to us and talk about what's led us down a certain path and what we could have done differently and what we can do differently, maybe to get to a resolution. Yeah. So we're going to be really brutally honest tonight and have a conversation that we haven't rehearsed or practiced or even visited again since that initial conversation.
So I think the other context that I want to provide is actually in terms of looking for new couples and new experiences for us. I think it's been quite tricky. And I think part of that has been your attraction to the men.
Right.
And I think part of that is around, I think you're less and less interested in men. Not to say that you aren't interested in men. Okay. And that doesn't feature within the scope of things. Mm-hmm. But broadly, sweeping statement, it's really apparent that actually you're much more interested in playing with the women.
Okay. So I have a few things to say about that. Okay. Broadly, you're right. Yes. And I know you like it when I say you're right.
Can I have that in writing?
And you may not.
Oh.
Secondly, I also don't want this to become a mudslinging competition at all. So what we say here tonight between us is not I'm going to forever hold this against you or, fling abuse at each other. That's not what this is about. Okay. Thirdly, when we started opening up our relationship, we did have some conversations around one of the primary reasons for me was to play with women, if I'm honest. And when we first started looking for people to bring into our relationship, it was on a threesome basis initially, wasn't it? Is that right?
I think that's
we were
fair.
looking for a woman to play with and so on and so forth. So yes, my attraction to all this started off with wanting to play with women again.
Yeah.
And all the way through, that's absolutely been a theme. And it's always that I seek whenever we have interactions. Now, along the way, I have met some amazing, and I will say amazing, men who I've played with. And that's a really important part of what we do still. That's not going away. However, yes, my attraction to women is probably more so than ever now. And I think because I'm not getting anything other than play situations within a four-way dynamic. Yeah. It's becoming a bigger and bigger thing, I think, in my mind. And now you're noticing it too.
Oh yeah.
Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think, I've kind of been noticing it for a while, and I think it's been tricky because actually it's hard to know when we're on the same page sometimes because I can't honestly tell sometimes, although I can actually if you're into a guy, but if you're on the fence about it, I think previously you would have made more moves and now you just don't really bother. And I'm not saying that and genuinely, this isn't a slinging of mud contest. No. I know that, but it's just an observation.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling less confident in moving forwards with people because I don't know
how I'm feeling,
how you're feeling. Yeah. And I know that some of that stems from the fact that you are much more interested in playing with women.
That is very true.
And it's not a mark on the men that we've met recently.
Not at all.
I think, and I do think sometimes your approach is much more of a people grow on you and you like them and then you're okay with them. There's very few men that we've encountered where you've been immediately, yep, I'm diggity down to go with this.
I'm what? Diggity down?
Yeah, I think that's what the core kids say, diggity down.
I've never heard you say that.
No.
I hope I know you say it again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I won't be
Diggity-down.
saying it much more than I already have. So I think it's been an interesting sort of shift in that dynamic. And I think there's been an element of that always there. But I think you're much less forgiving when it comes to this.
Yeah,
and it's becoming more difficult to find people that were like all four of us are connected with, or two of us or whatever. And I think it's interesting because in a group dynamic, you're not quite so worried because you get to move in and out of various things. But when it comes to like a couple scenario, you're much less forward than you have been previously.
Yeah, because I think the emphasis on a couple situation is always going to be really distilled down to there's four people, two of them are male, two of them are female.
Yeah.
And I accept that I cannot monopolise the female part of that dynamic to the exclusion of everyone else, because that wouldn't be a four-way dynamic. That would then just be me and a woman and you two watching, which I know is not really anyone's bag.
Well, I think part of it is that, you know, that you have had those interactions, and I think they have kind of ticked you over or turned you over, as awful as that may sound. But I think certainly I get the impression that element of it has been lacking for you.
Okay. So, I mean, this is interesting because I kind of do a little bit of thinking now and then about what does this mean for me as an identity? Am I a lesbian? You know, on a very basic level, I can't help but think, what does this mean? Does this mean I'm really not that into men because all I really think about is wanting to have interaction with the women?
Well, my assumption is that you've simply got the best man there is in the business, and therefore you don't need any other men, and you're just interested in the women but I can't back that up in the slightest. There are men that you're interested in.
Oh, of course.
In fact, there have been new men that we've met recently that you have had interest in.
I agree. So it's not that I don't want to play with men. I do, but I probably think more about playing with women.
Yeah, and I think that's been the shift in balance.
Yeah.
And this has been sort of brewing away in my head when we had this conversation, because it was really apparent to me that, you know, I've seen you sort of sit out much more than you would have done previously. Maybe. And part of that, I think, is because we've been through the health issues. I think that was kind of, up until
start with,
not that long ago. But now I see you sitting out more and taking a breath more, because I think you're more interested in playing with the ladies rather than continuously playing with the guys.
So there's that. But also I think if I'm feeling more that actually what I really want sexually from a play situation is to engage with a woman and not men, then I find it easier to sit back and just watch what's happening, because I will still get enjoyment from that.
Yeah.
As opposed to not doing anything at all.
No, I get that.
But it also does mean that I don't necessarily want to interact so much with the men in that situation, because actually it's not fair on them either.
Yeah.
If I'm not really into that because I'm feeling like I want something different.
Well, and I wouldn't want you to do something just for the sake of doing it. I think the other thing to sort of add into that mix is actually, over the last year, there have been one or two folks that actually haven't really listened to you and haven't really like men in particular, haven't really taken on your feedback that you've been giving them. And I think that experience does make your overall perception of wanting to play with men a lot worse.
Yeah. But I mean, also in the back of my mind, sometimes I don't want to come across as just this, grabby woman kind of thing that's insisting on monopolizing the female in that play situation, because I don't want to be seen that way. I want a woman to play with me because they want to play with me, because they're attracted to me, not because they're trying to, help me out by, ticking a box, or because they're doing it because they think their husband or their partner wants to see that. Because I sure as hell I know you don't want to see that.
No.
And we know that. And again, this leads me on to one of the problems we've got, which is, I know, because we've had a lot of conversations over a lot of years, that doesn't do it for you. And I've always accepted that that's a part of our relationship, but you just don't want to see that. That's fine. And actually, I don't really want you to see it. because I know it doesn't bring you any enjoyment and it would make me not enjoy the situation anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's totally awkward.
It's a tricky balance, I think. And certainly within the couple dynamic, there are moments where we've made this work, and I can think of a couple of circumstances recently where there's been, not that I've sat back, but that I have been a little bit more removed than normal, and you've been able to have some using air quotes, and I feel a bad person for this. Christ, after the diggity thing, this is even worse.
Down.
Yeah, diggity down. You've been able to have some lady time and sort of bring that into the mix, but it takes, I think, a little bit of careful balancing to make sure that works in the right way.
And I am also worried at those points that you are becoming frustrated or a bit fed up, and then it takes the edge off what I'm doing, and I think, oh no, what if he's like just not enjoying this and he's only doing it to try and appease me, and then I get completely overthinking in my head again, and then I worry because obviously at the centre of everything I put you. I don't want to do this at the risk or the compromise of our relationship, because this is front and focus for me. It's our relationship comes first.
So much like normal life, the centre of lady problems is a man. So there's a metaphor for you folks.
Hey.
So I think, so I haven't got bored, and I haven't felt left out because we've managed that in a good way. And I remember one play situation not that long ago where the lady said, "All right, so I'm going to play with Mrs. H now. Mr. H, I will get back to you soon." Knowing full well that I'm like, because that's all I needed. It was like, hey, I know that I'm going to have some really fun and sexy times. But I know that she wants to play with you. And that was managed really, really well. Fair play to them and fair credit to them for managing that in a really good way. So I think it is possible to sort of get that dynamic right. But the trick is actually finding men that you're really interested in, because I think it's almost playing in your mind so much that what you're really seeking is interaction with women more than anything else.
Yeah, I think it probably overshadows most of the things now that we do. And that's what's confusing me. Why am I obsessing over it? And why am I thinking about it so much? But is it partly because nothing's happening to kind of fulfill that somewhere else, and that's why it's so focused in the front of my mind right now? Or is it because, as I've gotten older, have things changed a bit, and has my kind of Kinsey scale tipped again? And I've always been really into women, but now I'm really, really into them, and I don't understand where that heightened response has come from.
I think that there's been a couple of occasions recently where you've made really nice connections with the women.
Yeah.
And I think...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And not every time have you been able to explore that through, again, just series of circumstances and unfortunate events. So I think as a result, you've been left blue muffed, whatever the phrase is, with an exploration or a moment that you want to explore.
Yeah, and that did happen recently. And I think we both know the situation you're referring to, but I felt this incredible connection and chemistry with this particular woman, and it was really hard not to act on that. And I wanted to, and obviously I didn't want to because I didn't want you to be upset or anything. So again, it kind of got suppressed and pushed out again, because I was like, well, God, no, the last thing I want to do is upset you I think
the tricky bit is that actually it was really interesting, because I've not seen you quite so hungry for something.
Like, come on, you see me hungry.
Yeah, I've seen you hangry, and I've seen you devour food. And I've heard, I know very well. But you actually were really interested, and it was really apparent that you were really into this particular person.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where when we came away from that situation, I was like, I felt bad that you hadn't been able to explore it.
Right.
And hence this whole conversation started, because flipping back to Miami, we came away from the PCAP event after all our friends had left, and we'd left the hotel, and we had a couple of days by ourselves. And we sat down, finally getting you some gluten-free pasta, because that's what you're craving. So this is about satisfying Mrs. H, I think this episode should be called. We started having this conversation, and where it was kind of what it really means. And I think, thinking it through as a part of a logical conclusion, it feels to me, because you don't want me to watch.
No, I don't.
You don't. part of that is because I'm not really bothered about watching, but part of that I think is that you just want the exploration with a woman yourself.
Knowing that you have no interest in it anyway, absolutely. I mean, if you did have some kind of sexual need to want to watch that and you got off on that, great. If that's how we can incorporate that into our playtimes, fab. But you don't, and so it doesn't feel sexy to me either.
So it was a kind of, how do we build this into what we're going about, how we're going about our lifestyle journey? Do we change our approach? Do we need to bolt on some stuff to figure out how that works? And in my sort of logical brain, knowing that you don't particularly want to put on a show, I don't particularly want to watch a show, that means there's only really a couple of options.
Correct.
So one is that we look for group situations where you can dive in like Scrooge McDuck. Into, we both dive into a pile of bodies.
And you're entertained enough.
I'm entertained, and that's all fine. And then you find a lady out of that group and you're like, yay, this is the best day ever.
And you don't even have to leave a room.
I don't even have to leave the room
because you're involved with someone else in that room.
Like a child, I have the video game to play.
You'll be there in your ball pit, right?
Yeah. And you'll be there in your ball-less pit, yes. So I think that's one way of tackling it. The problem is that those situations are relatively rare. I mean, they're not rare compared to regular vanilla Joe soap people off the street. They happen to us with more frequency than that sort of person.
But they're harder to orchestrate.
They're harder
certainly.
to orchestrate, and then you've got to get the right balance and you've got to get the right people. And, sometimes there's a mix, and sometimes, but I do think that you enjoy the group dynamics because it lets you get some of that sort of lady stuff, but also you can play with the men that you like within that group as well.
Yeah,
so that
and I do like men still. Yeah, I keep wanting to bring it back to that because it's not that I don't like men. I do.
It's just not that you like women more at the moment.
Yes, correct.
With the exception of yours truly, because I'm awesome.
Yes, of course.
Thanks for backing that up. I'm glad
Always.
that you put them. Yeah, all right. So the other option is then, do we start to explore you playing separately with a woman? Now, this is quite a huge leap for us because we've talked about going on a separate date to test the waters to see if that would be something that we were interested in and seeing if we can both cope with that. Because I think the thing that we've often worked on is that generally neither one of us wants to be the person sat at home doing nothing while the other of us is out having fun. So
we'd both have to go and have fun at the same time.
Well, I don't know. And this is the thing, like, this seems even more impossible than organising a group of people that we can catch up.
Wednesday orgy with 80% more women than men in it.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like organising that it takes time and effort and getting the right team players in there and all that sort of stuff. No, not those team players, folks. So how do we navigate that? And is that what we go for? Or do we look at this sort of idea of this separate date where, and I don't think it's necessarily that it has to be like an eye for an eye and that we you leave the house at precisely 7, I leave at 7, we're back, at 10.
No.
Exact. Do you know what I mean? It becomes a little bit too prescriptive, but at the same point, I'm also incredibly conscious that we are very, very good at throwing stuff in each other's faces. And I only refer back to the, previous events where you've kissed one more person. I've been like, oh, bloody hell, you harlot, look what you've done. Jokingly, admittedly, but there is
obviously is on your mind.
And you've said the same to me.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And I can't believe, and it's like, well, hang on a second. And then we very quickly devolve into a level of mudslinging.
Yeah. So we know we need balance and fairness.
Like the Force.
And some equilibrium in there that keeps us both sated, but at the same time allows us to explore other things without fear of recrimination and holding it against each other.
Yeah. And then the other thing to bear in mind is, how do we manage this from a relationship perspective? Do we look to just have like dates with people that we don't know and thus keep it away from people that we've already got established relationships with so as not to damage those?
Yeah.
Or do we look to find new people, in which case I can see the scene now. Mrs. H puts an ad on Fab or Swing Hub or whatever, 40,000 replies, and I put an ad on every platform known to man, and someone mistakenly replies to me thinking...
Mistakenly?
Yeah, like, oh, sorry, I thought this was a free sex line or something. And,
God.
and I can see it. And also, it's sort of how because as much as I have a level of confidence about myself, there is the good chance that this might knock it quite substantially, I think.
If responses are not received in the same volume on each side.
Well, I don't think it's like responses are received. And it's interesting because...
As I frantically hide 55 messages, no, I've only had 3 today.
Well, this is the thing. Merely having this conversation at this point in time is probably going to encourage a number of responses. And those responses ain't going to be aimed towards me. And it was really interesting actually listening to the Monogamish podcast. I
haven't listened yet, but I will.
Well, the online dating one, right?
Right.
Where they talk about going, separate dating or whatever. And, she puts... I
did hear the first.
You did, yeah, that's the one you've had, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
She puts her thing on, and naturally, being a lovely hot lady, she gets 1 million messages and he gets 3.
Yeah.
And that's not a slight on who he is, because he's a good-looking dude. He's in great shape. He's really interesting, really fascinating.
Right.
It's just that's the nature of the world.
Yeah, but I think he brought this up anyway on the podcast when they discussed it, and he was cognizant that and unfortunately is an indictment of how people see the world sometimes, and the hot woman gets inbox is flooded, and the guy's like, hey, McFly, and that's really unfair. But I mean, we find that anyway on all the social media. We've gone through this permutation on Twitter or X, whatever it's called.
Oh yeah,
where you put a picture of a woman up and it's 1 million likes, and the dude just gets a handful, and it's there's a disparity, and it's really hard for your confidence. I understand that.
Well, I recognise that, and I also recognise that the fragility of my ego is always at a sparkling low point. So
but your ego starts quite big in the first place, so surely
no, it really doesn't. It really is all a mask, and we've talked about that before, or at least to a certain extent. But I don't know that I would survive that. So it comes down to how we manage this and because we're not doing it from a hot wifing perspective, right? So I don't get kicks, for you going out, and I'm imagining that you wouldn't get a kick out of me going out and having a date.
Nah, I'd be happy for you, actually. I'm not saying I get necessarily a sexual kink from it or anything, but I'm probably more open now to considering experiences like this, because actually, if it's something that works for us both, and I can see that it's making you really happy, and but there's actually a bit of an excitement there for me. It's that's good, right? And how hot is it that someone finds my husband attractive and wants to spend time with him? So I'm not completely closed to the idea. It will just take some getting used to thinking about it, because we've not really thought about it much.
And I think this is the thing, and it's kind of also that much of what we've done has been about protecting our relationship.
Yeah, cool. Rightly so. Because that's what you always put at the heart of everything.
Right. But at the same point, then even stuff like where we don't have really separate chats.
No, we don't.
Now, we don't have separate chats for a reason.
No.
And
because they're dangerous for us, because we don't like the idea of not being able to see everything.
But then if you're going on a date with somebody, then you're not going to see that stuff.
No.
And therefore, where do we draw the line on it? Because we can't be sat with cut out newspaper eye hole things, watching what's going on throughout the course of the thing. And do we, how much do we consider it dating? Is it actually going to, because you've got to get to know somebody to a certain extent.
Unless it is someone we already know.
Unless it's somebody we already know.
That changes the playing field a little bit.
Which does, but also changes the dynamic and potentially the relationship with those people.
I know, but also it does afford you a little bit of protection in some ways, because at least it's people that we both know and trust.
Yeah.
And so I suppose the safety net is there because we know that we trust the person.
Yeah.
For one. And we know actually that those individuals potentially wouldn't do anything to hurt either one of us. So there is some level of security in there as well. But you're right, it would radically change the dynamic of those existing relationships. And so that's another conversation again, isn't it?
And then does that, so we go on a date or two or whatever and hook up with somebody. Okay, that happens. Then does that impact and influence the way that we interact with other people when we are together as well? Like, for example, say club events. Do we then say, it's okay for you to go off and do that, and it's okay for me to go off and do this?
Right. And, weirdly, now you've just said that. I was thinking about this earlier today because, I had a feeling that we would probably talk about this later today. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that it sounds really simple in the sense that we're both in the same club. We're not leaving the club, and we're not going to be really that far away from each other. We're going to be in an environment where we both know where we are. And then would it not just be really straightforward for you to go and play or interact with the woman that you want to play and interact with, and I did the same with? Is that really beyond the realms of possibility for us not to fall apart at the seams if that happened?
Well,
because it's not a date. It's not a separate chat. It is in a closed environment where we both know where we are. The time boundaries are kind of given because we're not going anywhere without each other. It kind of feels like almost too easy.
I disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree immensely, actually.
Why?
Because we've done everything we can and put all the boundaries that we've got in place to protect our relationship. So are we saying that those efforts weren't necessary?
No, because they existed for a reason at one point. What we're saying is, can we relax those for a short period of time to see how it feels?
Well, and that's the thing. I think we've got more of a proven track record of it going wrong than we have done of this type of thing going right. And I'm just really conscious that we haven't really kind of got to the bottom of it.
No.
And it feels like, I mean, a little bit at the moment, that this is something that you're pursuing rather than something that we're pursuing.
Yes, but although, counter argument to that, we did discuss the possibility of separate dating a little while ago, not because of this reason, but just idly discussing, how would it be if we did this? And, what would happen? And at that point, it emerged that I thought about that and thought, well, actually, I wouldn't date a man. I would actually date a woman.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, wait a minute.
But to me, that's even more of a threat to our relationship.
But why?
Well, for one, so, let's not get into previous relationships.
No, of course not. But we're talking about our own now.
But in terms of your own previous relationship, there has been a moment that was catastrophic, I would say, to a previous relationship for you, where you've introduced another woman into that environment. So I think there is a lasting worry and concern over that element. I think there's also a host of just general sort of, well, actually, if what we've been doing is protecting our relationship and the chances of one of us running off with somebody else, I feel confident and comfortable with who I am as a man, but I can't be a woman. So the threat is probably more to me. If
you're assessing this as a threat.
As a threat, yeah. So that's why I'm sort of reticent to kind of go, okay, this is how we're going to proceed without trying to get my head around it. And it's a very different thing to what we've been used to. Now we know a lot of people that play separately and play in different rooms and whatever. But we also know people where this has caused huge problems for them.
We do. So, but also for the people it's gone right for, how on earth do we do it?
Well, this is the thing. And it's a level of confidence in the relationship, but it's also a lack of jealousy. And I think both of us, and a lack of FOMO, I suppose, as well, which has not been, again, our forte. And we've not been great at, I'm just thinking back. So for example, right, when you had one of your biggest bouts of jealousy, it was about the fact that I was cuddling some woman in front of you.
Yeah, although I feel I'm okay with that now.
Yeah, but
that was going back a bit when things were still like, this is a feeling I've not encountered before.
But equally, those things have informed our approach so that whatever we've done past that has been built around the fact that we don't want to trigger those things again.
Yes, but I think we have managed to get over those things. Because I've definitely seen you cuddle women since then. Most definitely.
No, not me.
You definitely have.
Definitely.
So I know now that whilst I'm not impervious to, all elements of jealousy and, FOMO, I don't break. It's fine. As long as we navigate it in the right way. And I've definitely seen you cuddle women since, and I've been absolutely fine with it.
But that's just one example. I mean, I'm just using that as something that comes to mind. I think the thing for me is that I'm actually thinking about the whole thing. It's kind of how we go about this without damaging it. And obviously, whatever we decide and whatever we do, we always have to have the ability to pull the plug at a moment's notice. But it's that point of how far do we push ourselves before we go, oh, this feels uncomfortable but acceptable, to this has forever damaged our relationship, and I can't, I can no longer look you in the eyes because of the way you are with somebody else. That's the worry. And it's kind of like, how do we go about sort of making sure that we are both protected, because we've both said that this isn't something that we want to explore for a long time.
I agree.
To a place where you're very keen to explore it, I think, or at least a lot more keen.
Yes, although again, I just need to make it clear again that I haven't pushed for this because I feel like there's something inherently wrong.
No,
it's come about, I think, more because you've observed for yourself just how much I am attracted to women. And it's probably become more and more of I can't ignore it, and I can see for myself that this is not an ideal situation for me. But I've not pursued it and asked and insisted and said, well, if we don't do this, then I can't go on with this anymore.
No, I don't think you've said that. I think what you have said is that if you were to explore this, then you'd probably be a lot more open in terms of meeting with couples, because it's ticking that box, if you'll excuse the phrase, which is almost a direct quote.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I think.
Which feels a little bit like bribery, but that's okay.
No. Well, no, I'm trying to.
If you do this, then I'll give you this.
I'm trying to reach a point where we can continue what we're doing, and I am more invested in the play situations. Not because we're finding different people, but because I'm not constantly thinking about, do I not want to play with a dude because I'm just thinking about how much I want to play with a woman, and that's not going to be possible because of a dynamic. So maybe this would be a nice thing to have at the side, so I don't have to keep on hoping and praying that each interaction affords me that time I'm missing out on with women. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You kind of know.
You want to recharge your special meter, like Legend of Zelda or whatever, so that when you come to the boss fight, that bit's already replete and you don't care about it so much.
So like a Scott Pilgrim, little
level up
thing. I've leveled up on Lady Power.
Amazingly though, that new animated series does look fantastic, and I'm very excited to see it. However, I think I get where you're coming from, and I think it's tricky to see it in the way that you're intending for me, because it does feel a little bit like, well, if you let me do this, then I'll keep letting you do that. But I know that's not what you mean.
That's not what I mean.
But it's hard not to separate that in that way for my weird brain. I think there is, I came to that sort of, these are the two options really in terms of logic. The other option is that we just cut out couples and just meet like other than the couples that we know. I think that's really important.
We know a lot of couples, babe.
We know a lot of couples. We know a lot of amazing couples. But do we stop meeting new couples and only meet like single ladies?
Well, that's really significantly narrowing the playing field.
It is significant.
We know how difficult it is to do that. And again, as I said, I do still love meeting couples. I really do. And I thrive on those, interactions we have, probably more socially than physically sometimes, granted. But occasionally there is definitely a connection with, the guy and the woman. And I'm like, hey, this is great. But yeah, I don't know what to do.
Well, I think,
I don't.
As I sort of said to you when we had this initial conversation over that rather delightful pasta, it keeps bringing me back to the pasta. Clearly we've had pasta on the brain for the last, it was very good. I think, there are a number of ways we can go about it, and the sort of single ladies bit is a potential thing, but I don't think it kind of suits the connections that we do make.
No.
Because as you said, this isn't saying that you're taking your sort of interactions with men off the table. It's just that you're wanting more interactions with women.
Yeah.
Then the options become, like I said, the group dynamic, where you can do your Scrooge McDuck dive into the ladies or whatever it is. But I think that will only get you, that will only fill up 3/4 of the way for you. I think that's probably enough to keep you interested. But I think what you want is just a lady experience with yourself and another lady. or a number of ladies.
It's the one's fine.
So I think the only way that we can do that is if we play separately in some way, whether that's you going to like a ladies' night at a club, whether that's you going on a date with somebody that we know, or whether that's you going on like seeking somebody specifically for that thing. I think that could be a bit dangerous, that element, because I think that is opening up the relationship in a way that we've not really wanted to before.
Agreed.
And I think that does present itself with a risk. Not so much from one of us running off with somebody, although that is a possibility, because that's always a possibility. But from the person sat at home, the unknown factor is huge.
Agreed.
But as I said before, the meeting people that we already know also could damage those relationships.
Okay, so if we were to pick an option where we attempted a separate date, both of us. I mean both of us. Taking me out of the equation now and what I want from this, does the idea of you dating someone separately, or whether it be unknown or known, we don't quite know yet, does that appeal to you on some level?
Could be fun. I think there is a nervousness to commit to it, and I think that's probably because it's very much reminds me, right, of when we played with your friend in the hot tub.
That's great. We should do that again.
We should do that again. And the reason I mention that is because I had years and years of you going, no, you can't touch her. She's off bounds. You can't touch her. Don't even look at her. Mr. H, turn your eyes away. Don't even look at her. Don't touch her. All this sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden...
Years of conditioning.
And then I'm in a hot tub, or you're beckoning me, both of you beckoning me like sirens into the hot tub, all naked and making out with each other.
It's a trap.
It is. It's a trap. Concentrate on your papa
and wasn't a trap. And it was fine.
It was fine, but there was still that level of reticence to commit to it is inbuilt in me, because I feel that everything that we've done and everything that we've preached and everything that we've said has been, we're not going to do that. In fact, and to the point where we had not an argument, but a moment where it was an issue because you'd gone into a different room by yourself. To play with a woman.
The different room, huh?
Yeah, the different room.
The different room.
Cross
you mean
the
that
threshold.
Cheeky little threshold of a adjoining room that
Threshold
we had
and round
there.
a corner.
Yeah.
That was a lot, though, at that time. So you can imagine my conditioning where that was an issue, where I'm reticent to go, it'd be great to go out and have a separate date with somebody. And I was saying date. I mean, I'm assuming what we're really saying for the purposes of this is hook up, right?
I don't like that term, but an experience. Fine.
Right. But that's what we
fine. Okay.
Okay.
Some kind of experience.
Some kind of experience. So it's that kind of everything we've said has been against that thought. And all of a sudden we're sort of, not all of a sudden, but the logical answer to what we're talking about is that as the solution. So I'm in that space where I'm going, this warning, Mr. H, danger, warning, because,
okay.
that.
And I hear all that, but is it not kind of interesting and quite progressive really to flex some of those rules and revisit them, and not saying like go out and just break everything, but maybe just flex a few and say, okay, how does this feel? Does it, just because we made a rule once, does it forever have to be set in stone and never broken? Or never removed or adapted in some way? Can it evolve in some way? You're still going to have some boundaries in place because fine, why not? They're for our protection, but we're allowed to revisit those and adapt, surely.
We are, but I'm also terrified of being hurt and being left aside by myself in a pool of my own tears. But this is true, and I am terrified that our relationship could be broken. And looking back at our history, it wasn't easy for us to get together.
I know.
And my sort of level of trust over that stuff it's not that it isn't big, because I do trust you, but it's all too easy to slip into the past where that trust wasn't earned at that point and in fact was broken a number of times over a number of different things. So there is that at the back of my head where I think, well, I could be hurt in this. And yes, we can always be hurt in these things. We can always be left aside and someone can always go off with someone else. But the worry is there and is extra, particularly because of the topic that we've got.
Yeah, I mean, there's always risk around us, around everything we do, and we're playing in a space constantly where that threat exists in some way, because we're allowing ourselves to, play with our emotions with different people.
Yeah,
and emotions are involved because we've said ourselves we don't necessarily just hook up with people randomly.
Well, I know.
We like to invest some emotional attachment into those things.
But we've also done that with the guise of we've both been able to supervise, albeit not always necessarily directly, in that we've been around the corner through a threshold in a slightly different or whatever. Yeah, because we have pushed that
visibility.
We've had visibility, or as near as visibility, because we've been able to observe and we've been able to assure each other that this hasn't been some level of emotional developing bond, and that hasn't pushed us over the edge. Now, if we go our own ways for dates, not separate ways, but go our own ways for a date, then we don't have that visibility and we don't have that level of assurance. So what we're actually talking about is the level of trust, but also our ability to communicate that isn't going on, and relying on that being true. And that's where I struggle a little bit, because that's where we've come unstuck in the past. Mm-hmm. So for me, I've had trauma in this area, I suppose, in a nicest way. Not like trauma, but we've had a difficult part of a relationship where we've got through something similar. So it's just, and I'm not saying that we don't explore this, it's just trying to get my head around the concept of not being scared that trauma is going to hit me again.
Okay.
And I think that's where my head's at. I see the logical reason, the flow of where we need to, not where we need to, but where you would probably like to be. I see that. And I said that, when we had this conversation, I saw the logical approach. I see the physical manifestations of what the toll it takes on you not doing that. Not that you're, falling to bits or whatever, but I get that. But I'm also incredibly cognizant of this strong emotional core that we've built around and our own defenses. And what you're sort of asking to do is to knock back some of those defenses and be very, very vulnerable. And it's just that's hard for me, because I've been hurt before and I didn't like it. So I'm keen to avoid being hurt wherever possible.
Yeah.
And I'm also incredibly aware that I'm an emotional being in a whirlwind at the best of times. So those two things make it very hard to go, yeah, let's go do it, without me thinking it through and understanding it and trying to, not even to the point yet where we're sort of going, this is the framework of how we'd approach it, but to actually kind of just figure out that concept.
Okay, so telling me all that, thank you. May I ask then why you've even brought the topic up as something that we might want to explore if it feels so hard for you to get your head around doing it?
Because at the core of me, I want you to be happy.
Okay.
And I think you want this. And that the trigger for me was how much I could see you wanted to play with this particular lady. And I don't think I've seen that want in that way for a little while. And to be fair, actually, most of the time when I've seen you that way, it's been with men.
Or a sandwich.
Yeah, or you saw a kitten, or you thought you saw a kitten, either one. But actually, it was the trigger is that I wanted to make you happy, and I wanted you to experience what you wanted to experience. Yeah. Now, within that would have been quite a controlled environment, and wouldn't have been so traumatic for me to go through that. But equally, I suppose you also have to add the holiday vibe to it. The hey, we're on holiday, hey, we're in a carefree environment, hey, everyone's so non-monogamous, and when in Rome, and all that sort of stuff that adds to it. But when you bring it back to home, and when it's much closer, it feels much more oppressive to me.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that I don't want you to explore stuff and to have a good time. It's just I don't want to break, and our relationship to break as an expense of that.
I'm going to just look at holidays real quick.
No,
reasons.
We're not going to Lesbos.
What?
No, we're not. So yeah, that's what's going around in my head. I kind of think this is something that we need to thrash out and kind of figure out properly.
Yeah. We can't just get to a point and go, hey, we'll do this now.
You can't go into it, and you'll excuse the phrase willy-nilly, because one, they probably aren't involved for you, but also we need to sort of figure out how we do this and whether we're both adequately equipped to handle the situation. Because I think at the moment, my take is that you've got a much stronger drive to explore this than I do.
Well, to this point, until this point, I'd probably tried to suppress all that as much as I could. I really, truly had, because I'd kind of given up on it ever happening, because I didn't ever want this. I couldn't really see how it was going to happen. Yeah. If I'm honest, it's like, okay, well, that's never going to happen. So just get over that one. But, and you can suppress it to a point. You can diminish how much you think about it and how much credence you give to those situations, and how much, I do have an imagination after all. Cool. I'll deal with that for a bit and just let my imagination live vicariously through my own imagination. Great. But, again, there's only so much you can suppress that. And I hadn't really thought we'd ever get to this point even where we're even discussing it, let alone
and that's
thinking about how we may, arrive at some kind of resolution. Although the way we're going, I'm going to be 60 years old by the time we do that. And then I'll be like, nah, too old now. I don't want to do it.
Well, I think the other thing is that, we can discuss it and discuss it and discuss it, but at some point we have to kind of make some decisions. I think, ultimately you're getting more experience than you would do if we weren't.
Of course.
So
you're right.
You're already in a better space than what you would have been had we decided to completely
agree,
pull
but
the plug on that.
I don't want to be unfair or lead people on, and that's the worst part. I don't want to get to a point where I'm meeting people under false pretenses and letting people maybe think that I'm really into something and I'm actually less so, because this is overshadowing everything I'm doing.
Well, I think the other thing that we need to kind of work through, and this is probably something that we take off air at some point, is kind of how we communicate in terms of whether you're interested. Because I think as a result of this, or seeing some of this, we've kind of lost a little bit of that assurance that we're kind of both interested.
Yeah.
And I think your level of interest for the level of interest that you've shown has been the same consistently, but that's not the actual level of interest that you have. So what I've taken as I'm interested in these people, actually doesn't necessarily mean that. And do you see what I mean? So what you're showing physically, right, and interactions with people, with couples in particular, hasn't changed.
Right.
But mentally inside, I think your want to play with the guy has changed, or certainly sort of that balance has changed. Therefore, it's not so easy for me to tell as to whether you do want to play with someone or not.
Right. No, I understand that. Yeah.
That took a long while to get that, but I think that makes sense. And I think we need to kind of realign ourselves and be better at you going, I don't want to do this. Because I'm kind of there going, yay, wouldn't it be great if we all did this? This would be lovely, 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 lovely. Because the level of interest that you've shown is the same that you've always shown.
And I get that. But I do still like meeting people. But then it's not always apparent to me until we're in the situation. I'm like, actually, no. I'm still thinking that actually what I'm more attracted to right now is the woman.
Yeah.
But I can't just go, hey, like you.
Well, to a certain extent, I think we can be clear on that. Certainly with each other. So, and there's been a few situations recently where we've been like, yay, this is great. And you've not known quite where you're at with it. And we kind of need to get better at working through that and kind of being honest. And I'm also very conscious that for you, a lot of men are a slow burn, and it takes you a repeated number of times to kind of like them.
Agreed. Sometimes.
So I'm also of that, this could be just a slow burn. So when people are like, oh, Mrs. H is really hot, and what does she think of me? And I'm like, I don't know. I just don't. Honestly, come back in a week. But that's really hard because you don't seem to be able to communicate that.
Well, what I will say is, and this is an interesting observation of my own, is that ability to form a cerebral connection still exists for me with men and women. Okay, that is very much a a focus of what I look for. Okay, so that I can still do that really, really well with males as well as females, and I really like that still. And in fact, if I form a very good, connection like that, then it's more likely that I will be interested in them. That makes sense. But whereas I wouldn't look at a guy and go, he's hot, I'm into him.
That does happen, but it's rare.
But it's rarer, and what I probably look more for is that personality, that cerebral jump where I'm like, oh, I like this person, not because they're male. Actually, the gender seems to be irrelevant for me at that point. It's not the gender I'm attracted to at all in that environment. It's more, am I clicking with this person on a mental level? And if I am, then I'm probably quite interested. But it's so hard to explain. It's not. I don't look at them and go, I fancy them because they're male. I just might fancy them because they interest me.
And I get
and the
that.
Gender's irrelevant.
But you also have to be able to communicate that to me and also communicate that to them. And I think that's the challenge that we're facing.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not telling you off. You're looking like I'm telling you off, but I'm really not.
I'm just frustrated because I can't figure it out.
Okay.
I know there's been a shift. I get that. And whilst I've always, for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been able to, recall some of my earliest memories in school, I know I've been attracted to women.
Mm-hmm.
That's never gone away. What are the chances?
I know, right?
It's great, isn't it? That's always been there. Now I know I've never identified as gay. I've not said, I'm definitely lesbian, but it's definitely something that's over time got a stronger and stronger sense of identity in me.
Okay, well that's fair.
But at the middle of all that is my love for you has never, ever, ever shifted or changed. It's not got less. It's not been something I've thought, well, does this impact how I feel about you? No, you're everything to me, and I know that that's not something I don't want in my life.
Is this because I've become more womanly in my older age?
If you could just grow your hair a bit. No.
I don't need to grow any more hair. I've got more than enough hair for you. In fact, I do need you to assist with the old back shave this week. Thank you very much, wife. It's sexy to keep your mind on.
Lucky.
Yep. Just thinking about you're trimming some lady parts and you'll be fine. It'll be, honestly, look, I absolutely adore and love you. And I think the reason why this requires so much discussion is because that we do have that connection and that we do value this relationship, and we don't want it to break over
not at all.
Basically having sex with women, because that's really what we're, and men.
Absolutely. That's what it's coming down to.
Well, that's the thing. And I think, it's been really useful to sort of cover this ground again. I think there's probably the whole other suite of conversations that go with this that we need to kind of thrash out. But what we wanted, gentle listener, was to kind of share some of this stuff with you, because we felt this was like a really important conversation for us. And it felt every now and then, and we've said this right at the very beginning, we'll go to, for some strange reason, it always seems to be Italian, we'll go to a restaurant and we'll have some drinks and we'll just thrash out these things that are in our lives. And I think this one was, this happened, and this conversation has been an evolution of that. So we've not only had a quick version of that conversation, but we've also kind of expanded upon it. And I think it was really important for us to have that discussion.
I think it's quite pivotal. It really is. I mean, ultimately we could do nothing. That's always an option. We could do absolutely nothing and just carry on as we are. And, chances are nothing will really break as a result.
Nothing, tra-la-la.
Yeah, maybe my porn brows will need to be bigger. Who knows?
Well,
nothing will fundamentally break if we don't do anything. Although I suspect it will become a little more fractured over time, because we're getting less and less from the interactions we do have, for the reasons we've just gone through.
I think
it might slowly ebb away a little bit, and it will get to a point where I'm like, no, I'm not interested in anyone.
Well, I don't think that's quite true, because I think where we've got established relationships, I think that's one thing. And that's quite different.
Yeah, it is very different. And that goes back to that whole, cerebral thing we were talking about, where I know that, the connection I have mentally is so incredibly strong. It really doesn't matter about what gender is involved there. I love the connections we have there. They're not going to go away.
It's the new connections, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
The add-ons, the bonuses, the people are yet to be in the circle of trust. Those folks, that's what I'm talking about. Anyways, we've gone on for a good hour now.
Yeah, we haven't got an answer.
Well,
but maybe we've got some stuff to think about.
Well, if anything, now we can just play this back and listen to it and figure out, just be like, what would you do? Like, listen to it as though we're not us and go, what would you advise these people? And we'll go, just tell them to fuck off and get over themselves.
Oh, my goodness.
Which would be your approach.
No.
And mine would be a considered 12-page essay with research and notes, because that's kind of me. So, ladies, if you want to hit that, just send us a message. Just joking. Right. So, summing up.
Yes.
I utterly love and adore you.
Yay.
You are still the number one-est person in the world for me.
Excellent.
We need to follow this up and talk about it more.
Yeah.
If you've got thoughts, advice, suggestions, please send them in.
Yeah, I really want to hear them. Like, how has this happened to you? How have you navigated it? What the hell do you do with this?
Yeah. So
I don't want to break anything, but at the same time, we want to try and move on with it a bit and do something positive with it.
Exactly that. So let us know. And we'll let you know how the Winter Wonderland goes. Hopefully, it will be absolutely amazing, and people will be listening to this.
Mrs. H ran off with 10 women.
Well, they'll be listening to this in the car, leaving Winter Wonderland, going, "Fucking hell! Did you see Mrs. H in that lady pile?" And see Mr. H crying in the shower, scrubbing himself down.
Unlikely.
Yeah, clearly.
You'll do all right.
Oh,
you would do all right. You probably did all right.
Probably did all right. Oh, thanks, wife, for that wonderful vote of confidence.
Well, we talk about what happened in the past now, because it's not happened yet, but it will in the future. And I think you did just fine.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yay, me. Mrs. H, do your thing.
Well, thank you for hopping into our bed.
Right, it's a Disney off. Right?
I can't do a Disney off.
You can. You've got to just.
I don't know the Disney songs.
You've got to sing a different Disney song. We can't repeat them. I can show you the world.
So I can't sing the same song?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Let it go.
Now I'm the king of the swingers. Whoa, the jungle's VIP.
Taylor's Oldest Time. Taylor's Oldest Time.
Life is like a hurricane
is that
here
Disney?
in Duckburg.
Shit, my hot water bottle. Is that Disney? Seriously?
You've just shit out a hot water bottle. Are you asking if DuckTales about Huey, Dewey and Louie and Uncle Scrooge, the three nephews
Disney,
of Donald Duck, one of the principal characters of Disney?
Fine. Have it your way, Hopper. Yes, they're bloody Disney
I am the
birds.
winningest. I won the Disney off. Thank you very much.
It wasn't really much for Disney off, was it?
Taking my trophy.
You know way more than I do.
When you wish upon a star.
Oh, that's
That was
Pinocchio.
awful. Is it?
Is it Pinocchio?
I don't know what tone I was singing it, but it's a song.
Isn't it? When you wish upon
You just sang it
a
again.
star.
You failed again for the second time.
I was trying to sing it properly.
Undefeated.
You think you've won this one, Hopper.
I'll get you next time, He-Man.
That's definitely not Disney.
And he prays. Oh my God, does he pray? How many copyright infringements can I get away with this
God,
week?
one day you're just going to get sued.
Oh, you could have also gone down, 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 down.
That's Fraggle
down,
Rock.
Down. Yeah.
Is that Disney?
Well, they own it now. They own the
Oh my
Muppets.
God, are Disney just like massive empires of the entire world now? Do they own everything?
Pretty much.
Ah, okay. Who knew?
There we go.
You have a lot of money then.
You could have also gone with dun 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 dun.
Oh, that's Mandalorian.
Do 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 do. It's not Guess the Song, which you seem to be much more.
I'm much better at that.